A lake like this that we're fishing here in East Tennessee, this is what I'd call a classic highland reservoir. I mean, you can look up this valley and see these high ridge lines going both directions. Obviously here early in the year when the water's drawn down, something that can be a really big deal for me late winter, early pre-spawn, all the way up really until those fish start spawning, is fishing areas where there's water running into it. We're not far enough back in this one yet to see it, but there is a nice run in the back of this creek. We just had some rain actually yesterday morning, had a pretty significant rain, and that puts a fresh, just a fresh movement of water coming into a lot of pockets, a lot of creeks, a lot of different places will have it. Ones like this one though actually have some water flowing in all the time. And then it's got a really big drainage area, so when you get a big rain, it's got even more than the next pocket over the one either side. It's a really good pattern to run on these highland reservoirs throughout the country in that early season. But the time that it's most effective is when you get a warm rain. If you get a cold 35, 38 degree rain, you want to get as far away from here as you possibly can. You get a 55, 60 degree rain, you want to get as far back in here as you possibly can. Those really cold water temperatures, those fish will back out, pull out, just not bite or whatever. But when you get a nice warm rain, those fish will just flood into these places, and I've had some unbelievable times. Pull up all the way in the back, put the talons down, and you just can't throw far enough to reach where all those bass are. I look at where I live, where I grew up, here in East Tennessee, Douglas, Cherokee, Norris, a lot of our highland lakes, even Fort Loudon and Tellico lakes have a few of them. You look at other parts of the country, look at the Ozarks, the Grand Lake or Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks. A lot of those places have similar type deals where you can go back in the back of those steep cuts and find some fresh water flowing in. Places in Alabama, Smith Lake is probably one that historically has always been known for fishing run-ins, but it's all about those mountain, highland reservoir style lakes. It's got a lot of deep valleys and a lot of areas that have to drain, they drain down real quick. So you get that rain within just 3 or 4 hours, that water is going to be flowing in because it flows off of those mountains so fast and into that water. A big thing that I think that does, besides just warming the water and then pulling the shad from out here back in there to where that warm water is, I think it washes in a lot of crawdads. I think it washes in a lot of night crawlers, possibly even some frogs that will come out of hibernation with a warm rain like that. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of food that gets pushed into those areas from up the hill. And then you also have a lot of bait from the lake that pulls back into those areas with that warm water. So you've got where both of those food sources are meeting together. The bass are right there in the middle to take advantage of it. When you're fishing that run-in pattern, a few things I'm going to have on the deck to be using. A crankbait is probably my go-to number one. I mean, it's early in the year, it's pre-spawn. It's hard to beat a flat-sided crankbait. I'm going to have a spinnerbait rigged up as well. Probably have a bladed jig just because. I'll also have a standard flipping style jig. Sometimes those run-ins will have a lot of debris and stuff, back there in the back of them. And I've caught them flipping those mats with a, like a 1/2 ounce pros jig or something. Those 4 or 5 baits, that's pretty much what you need. You're going to be fishing pretty simple stuff, a lot of rock, a lot of wood, sometimes some current coming in. If that water, when it starts to clear up, maybe the next day, a jerk bait can be really good, a single swim bait can be really good. But when that water's fresh, it's really dirty and warm, a crankbait, a spinnerbait, and a jig, man, meat and potatoes fishing, that's kind of all you need. We're back here about at the end of the road, but man, so many times from this point back is where I catch them, in the pre-spawn when you've got that warm water coming in, especially in a scenario like this. We've got some fairly clean water with some dirty water mixing in with it that's actually a couple degrees warmer. Out in the main lake, I've seen as cold as 47. In this pocket, I saw like 50, but back here it's actually 52. That slight, couple degree difference can make a huge difference in your catches. Oh, got one. Man, he was right on the edge of that mud line right there. It's kind of loaded up on that spinnerbait. Yeah, that's not a bad fish. Those cool colors mixing. I mean, that dirty water, right where it's mixing with that clean water, that's right where that guy was sitting at. Come here, buddy. Good chunky, back of the creek, run in, pre-spawn bass right there. Spinnerbait fish, man, that's so much fun. Being able to fish something up there that shallow cold water like this, those fish will pull up just into no water at all. Get back there and feed up, get ready to spawn. Oh, dude. Oh my goodness, that's a big one. Oh, please stay on there. Please stay on there, fish. Dude, that's a big one. Right on the edge of that seam, just, I mean, perfect place, right where I thought it should have been. Better see her in that dirty water. She came out of really clean water though. Come here, fish. Yeah, look at that. Dude, a big old chunk of a bass on that Pro Series spinnerbait, man. Pulled right back in here in the very back of this little creek. Some dirty water mixing with some clean water. That is a beauty of a pre-spawn bass right there, man. What a nice one. Oh my goodness, that fish is cold. Just pulled up in here, feeding up a little bit, taking care of those babies, getting them fed before she gets ready to spawn here in a few months. So that fish right there, that's the reason you don't quit throwing spinnerbaits. They've never stopped producing bass. That fish right there is evidence of it. That was definitely a good fish right there, and it was a good indication that I made, you know, a wise change with that. I had been fishing a Colorado Willow combination, but getting back into here and seeing some of this green water, even though it's mixing, I actually made a change to a double Willow. I just like that double Willow, a little bit more flash, a little bit less vibration. When I've got, you know, some cleaner water like this, it's a perfect kind of mud line though. I've got some nice green here, mixing with some real brown right there. A lot of times those bass will use that clear water as their ambush point. Your retrieve with a spinnerbait is really what makes or breaks it. I mean, to be honest, if you're not fishing that bait at the right speed for the conditions, and also you got to take in mind the species of bass you're fishing for. When I'm up north fishing for smallmouth, warm water, you'll never see me reeling a spinnerbait the speed I am right now, where I'm down south fishing for largemouth, 52-degree water. Is going to be a much, much different retrieve speed. One thing that is going to be very similar is that I'm going to impart some action with the rod tip into that spinnerbait. So take a little piece of wood like this right here. I'm going to bring that down through there. I can feel it a little bit. I just want to actually just kind of shake the rod tip just enough to make that bait kind of flare underwater. And that is a major triggering mechanism. And that goes to, you know, whether you're in really muddy water like this and you're fishing for big largemouth, you're up north fishing for smallmouth, burning that where you're just cranking that spinnerbait, then you kind of shake it. Any of those little subtleties that you add to that spinnerbait really help trigger strikes when those fish are following that bait along. I think fish follow baits way more than what we consider, whether that's a crankbait. We see it a lot with swim baits, spinnerbaits. Those fish are following that bait along. It may bump into a piece of cover. You give it a little bit of rod tip action. That's what triggers those fish to strike so many different times. You know, it's pretty general to say colder water, you want to retrieve the bait slower. Warmer water, you want to retrieve the bait faster. And that goes with crankbaits, spinnerbaits, all those type of things. You know, that's generally what you want to do. For me though, if you were really going to break it down, I consider anything from 55 and under to be cool water, and anything above that to be warm enough that I can fish the bait pretty quick. You know, so if I'm fishing 57, 60-degree water, I feel like I can reel that bait probably as fast as I need to trigger the strike and not have to worry about going too fast. You get down into that 50, 52, 54-degree range, I probably need to slow it down some just to give those fish a better chance at it. But you start getting above 55, and that's where it kind of turns the corner for me for all types of reaction baits, that I don't know that I can fish it too fast at that point in time, just matching the other factors, you know, to the mood of the fish at that point.